Hello, friendly alumni. You're listening to From Here Forward, an award-winning UC Podcast Network podcast. I'm Carol.
And I'm Jeevan. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Love Day to Saint Valentine, Cupid, and to all mortals who celebrate. And lastly, happy Valentine's Day to the men in heterosexual relationships who buy their girlfriends and or wives flowers more than once a year.
My God, the bar is really on the floor, isn't it? The bar is so low that we're turning to the marine world for today's episode. Human love just isn't cutting it.
So what are you doing for Valentine's Day, Jeevan?
Well, Valentine's Day, created by the greeting card companies, an opportunity to celebrate love in all forms. So I've got Galentine's Day on the books with my best friends.
That is very sweet, and I love that you're spending it platonically romantically. Well, I'm having a solo date, actually. I'm taking myself out because I'm the best love I've ever had.
That is so on brand for you, and I can't wait to hear more about it. Since it's the Day of Love, Carol and I wanted to discuss all things companionship and romance outside of the human world, and as I mentioned, in the marine mammal world, a return to our roots of sorts.
We had the absolute pleasure of speaking with a beloved UBC professor, Dr. Andrew Trites, who is also the director of the Marine Mammal Research Unit. He was a senior author of a recently published paper that found orcas and dolphins have a far more collaborative foraging relationship than scientists initially believed. We've linked this paper in the show notes if you'd like to learn more.
We asked Dr. Trites about this fascinating finding and the lessons of companionship humans might be able to take away from our mammal cousins.
We hope you enjoy, and let's dive in.
So my name is Andrew Trites. I'm a professor and director of the Marine Mammal Research Unit, which is here at UBC in the Institute for the Oceans and Fisheries.
Lovely. And can you tell us a bit more about the Marine Mammal Research Unit? What is it? How did you get involved?
Oh gosh, well, it's something we created going back, I guess, in the early 1990s. And essentially, it was just responding to a need. There's been recovery mammals in British Columbia since we stopped hunting and killing and culling them. And as the numbers have increased, there's been lots and lots of questions about, well, what impacts are they having on fishing? How can we coexist with them? At the same time as ours were increasing, there were populations in Alaska that were dropping fast and furious to the endangered species list, such as stellar sea lions, while ours were booming. So there was just an opportunity to work with some of the brightest minds we have here at UBC, bring some fresh perspectives in, new techniques, new technologies. We developed a partnership with the Vancouver Aquarium to help us learn things about animals under controlled conditions we couldn't do in the wild. We set up field camps in British Columbia and Alaska, and essentially opened the doors to covering so many species and issues that aren't going away and things which matter to the public and to our students here at UBC.
Great. We're going to add some fun questions before we get into the actual study. So last year you were awarded the UBC President's Award for Public Education. Congratulations. That's great. So that tells me that you're kind of like an expert. You got a lot of facts up your sleeve. So with Valentine's Day around the corner, do you have any romantic facts from the marine world?
Oh, I don't know what's romantic in there. I guess it's all in the eyes of the beholder. If you're a stellar sea lion male, well, the bigger, the fatter you are, the more attractive you are to the girls. So that's kind of reassuring for some of us to think that it isn't all about being thin and muscular. We do see things, we try not to bring that into our personal lives, but we certainly do pick up little tips that make us feel perhaps a little bit better about ourselves, speaking from the male perspective.
I love that. Challenging beauty standards in all settings is so funny. Thank you for sharing that back. I think that gave us all a nice little chuckle to start the conversation, which is great. So we wanted to talk about the recent study that you worked on about interspecies associations during foraging. Can you tell us a bit about the scope of the study and what prompted that area of exploration?
Among the different studies we've been involved in, a lot of them involve comparing an increasing population to a decreasing one because it's very hard to do controlled experiments. So we try to do what we would call a natural experiment, which in the case of killer whales is trying to figure out why are the southern resident killer whales declining. There's like 74 right now, and their future is very bleak. Meanwhile, there are cousins to the north, the northwestern killer whales, that have the very same culture, the same social structures. They also love to eat Chinook salmon, the number one prey source. They're increasing. There's like over 300 of them. Both populations are dealing with declining salmon, so how come one can do it and the other one can't? So, to answer that question, we decided we would put cameras onto the backs of killer whales using suction cups. Some of the best suction cups are made at Canadian Tire. Roof rack suction cups are just perfect. They stick down, they hold on, and when the time comes right, they peel off the animal. So we used it to put a camera on, but it wasn't just a camera. It was like a killer whale Fitbit went with it. And it was, of course, killer whale size because it's recording water temperatures, three-dimensional movements, water depth that they're swimming at, light levels, and it's got also a hydrophone, so it's listening and recording. So we put all this technology on because what we wanted to do was to see the northerners and killer whales. Are they finding fish faster? Is it easier for them? How do they find these fish? We've got some ideas, but we really wanted to follow a foraging dive by killer whale. We wanted to be there with them. The only way was to essentially put technology and have the killer whales take technology with them, which when they came back after a day of feeding would come off the animal and leave no marks, and then it would float to the surface. And then we would recover it and then download the audio recordings, download the video and all the data. And then we got to watch what was going on. And at the same time we're doing that, we were doing the parallel study with southern residents to see whether or not they were having more trouble or not. Because our assessments of fishes, there's in fact more fish available to southerns than to northerns. So here's the first chance to experimentally follow and compare in real time what they were doing. So we get our footage back, and of course, it's the first time you sit in the cabin of the ship, and we've downloaded, and we're all huddled around, and we want to see what were the whales see. We want to follow them down to depth and see them with a big fish and catch it. And in one of the first few frames, we discovered we got photobombed by dolphins. Like they were just there in the frame. It's like, no, you're not part of the study. You're messing up what we're doing. And we've seen dolphins with killer whales before, but I've always assumed, like pretty much everybody else who studies killer whales, they're just there to mess with them. It's like, I don't know, maybe like the pesky little brother that just won't leave you alone and they're just harassing. And it sort of seemed like maybe that was the case, but it really wasn't. As we began to watch, we didn't see any type of antagonistic relationships. We didn't see the whales trying to like nip at them or push them out of the way. It seemed like everybody was there to have a good time. But not only that, we saw something really remarkable, which is within the frame, we saw a whale that had a fish in its mouth just in front. It bit it in half to share with another killer whale. And when it bit it in half, there are all these little scraps and bits of tissue floating in the water, and the dolphins were eating it. The dolphins were getting leftovers. I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. And so I guess maybe that they're just waiting for handouts. Why not? And then we watched further. And then we began to see more things that were really intriguing. Like we would see the dolphins leading a dive, and the dolphins were going down and swimming to depth, and the whales were following them. Well, that didn't make sense because if we thought they were there to harass the whales should not be following. They should be swimming the opposite way. And then because we had the hydrophones on, we could listen. And as the whales go down, we see light, we see the dolphins, and it goes black. Because when they get down into the really deep water, it is pitch black. You cannot see anything, but you can hear. So what we're hearing then is we could hear the whale echolocating. It's trying to find fish because they send out, it's like sonar signals. And it goes ping, 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 and then it bounces back, ping, 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 off of hard objects. But particular fish, it bounces off their swim bladder. So it's like a little air sac in the fish that gives it buoyancy. It sends back a signal, and the whale is listening for it. Here's what was really fascinating. The killer whale was pinging less and less and going kind of quiet, and we could hear the dolphins. And then we thought, you know what's going on here? The dolphins are scouts. They're like equipped with these radars, and they're fanning out in front in the dark water, and they're pinging, and the killer whale is eavesdropping and is listening for the dolphins to find the fish. So you might say, well, why don't the dolphins just go get the fish? Well, they can't because the fish are too big. And if you ever look in the mouth of a killer whale, well, there you're looking at Tyrannosaurus rex. They are giant-sized teeth meant for grabbing and ripping apart. If you look inside a dolphin's mouth, they're little tiny pins. It's just like there's 100 of them. They're just minuscule, tiny. They basically give you little like love bites. That's about all you're going to get out of them. So, and also, if you look then, you realize too that the dolphin can't swallow anything that big, nor does it have the teeth to break it up, but they can find them. They just can't catch them. And so by working together, the story we were able to piece together, literally it's like ecological detective work. Each step we're trying to solve, like what's going on? What are we hearing? And then we've got the dive tracks. And then we can hear even when the killer whale then takes over and we're hearing the clicks and then we hear buzz sounds and then we hear crunch. And that crunch sound is when death occurs to the fish because the killer whale now has locked jaws on the fish and we hear this crunch. And so now we've got to, and then we can listen as there's no celebrations underwater, but there's quiet thrusting. And then we can see them coming up to the light and some dolphins in there. And we can see this tail of a fish hanging. Transient killer whales, the meat eaters, have been seen with the resident fish eaters. The one that seems to chase the other one away are the residents. And so they seem to have the stronger hand. And so it would appear that what's going on in the big picture is that here we've got parts of our coast where huge salmon are migrating through. And as they're migrating, they're feeding on herring. And in the same area, so that's what brings the resident killer whales there. And the dolphins are there because there's lots of herring, which is probably why the salmon are coming there. So they're in the same area. And probably over time, the dolphins have figured out, oh, these are the good ones. We love these residents because they're very vocal. And if you get a chance to hear some of their calls, it's like magical. The transients are not vocal at all. They hunt like complete silence. And by the time you know you're there, it's game over. But they do vocalize a lot after they made a kill. They really yuck it up. It's like bragging, look what we got, yum yum, so good. But they're quiet before that. And so in all likelihood, this is a level of cooperation that has occurred because of circumstance. Hey, they're in the same area, and dolphins and killers, they're both curious, but I suspect the dolphins are even more curious. Like, hey, I wonder where they're going. Like, what are they doing down there? Oh, look. And it probably just came through trial and error to develop this cooperative relationship. So I don't think anybody had a game book. Say, hey, what do you think if we work together? I think it really came out through by accident, but these are sort of accidents that work and it reinforces itself. So now it's like, hey, we do this. We're all going to get something good at the end of a hunt.
I think the concept of a dolphin Fitbit is awesome and hilarious. As a researcher, how involved are you in the process of getting the technology onto the killer whales?
Well, involved in, choosing the team that can do it because, and then coordinate everything and running the show. But in this case here, we have our mothership, which was a former whale watching boat called the Geekami. And we had also advanced acoustic equipment on board to look for fish. And so another research team there. Then we have our little boat that's going to go to track the whale and to put the tag on. And for that, I've got 3 people on board that. I've got the skipper, who was a former whale watching captain. So he really can predict whale behavior. Like, I'm not messing around here. We get one chance at this and we have to do it right. And then the tagger was actually the same person that built the blue whale at UBC, Mike DeRoos. And I met him first as an undergraduate student, and his project as part of the Marine Mammal course, he built a sea otter skeleton, the very first one. And then, so he takes like the world's smallest marine mammal, and then he built the biggest one, put it back together. But one of Mike's, we became friends just over the years. But one of his talents is not only is he able to weld and build, but he's also got the upper body strength and experience to put these tags on because we're putting on a very super light tag on the end of a pole that is like so long, and you would not believe how heavy that is. There's not many people that can, it looks so light to hold. There's just this carbon fiber pole. It's so light. And the tag is like I can hold in one finger, but you put that little thing on the end of the long thing and it is just incredibly heavy. And so it took a while to find the right team that could do that. And then I had a postdoc researcher with Sarah Fortune at the time, and now she's a professor at Dalhousie University. So UBC served her well and is now serving Dalhousie well. And so she was on board, and this was part of her postdoctoral study, was this particular aspect of the study. So it's a whole team. I have another team on board, another postdoc that was doing the acoustic fish part, and a captain and a cook. There's a whole team that goes into this. But before that, we're also just, working with a company that's building the tag, and they're down in Australia and coordinating with them and getting our permits in place. So there are just a lot of things that need to be dealt with. And often in the case of the PIs, it's often our faculty at UBC that are write the grants and lead these projects. But in all cases, we have an amazing team of students and researchers and assistants that make it happen. And I think it's one of the things that draws people to UBC is that like we've got such incredible expertise here. And literally, there's no problem that I might have that I can't find somebody at UBC that could help me with, whether it's needing help to do a scan at the hospital of a blue whale flipper, to dealing with battery problems. So we go to the engineering department, to physiology or wherever. It just like, I'm constantly amazed at the depth of talent we have to work in problems and the willingness of people to come together to help solve problems.
One might say cooperative foraging.
Well put, well put.
I imagine as a researcher, that footage and data must have been fascinating to watch. What was it like for you initially seeing and hearing the acoustic and visual data from this study? What was that experience like?
When this tag comes off, it's a pretty bulky little thing. We have it painted with fluorescent colors and paint. And we've got a VHF, like a radio signal on it. And we also have something to connect to a satellite. And at the end of the day, to find this is like looking for a needle in a haystack. We are searching everywhere. We're getting close to calling the Coast Guard for help. Like, where is this? And so when you finally get it back, it's just such a relief because this little tag is not like you go to your local store to buy a Fitbit for whales. Like these are custom made and they are like prototype tags, which are really expensive. So everyone we've got to get back. We only have 3 and we can't really afford. So yes, we did a bit and we might lose one, and then we didn't lose any, which was just amazing. But we had really dedicated people. In fact, we were calling down to our office at UBC saying, hey, we lost our tag. Could you get online and go to the satellite and find out the last coordinates and see if that can get us down? And so we were coordinating using UBC while we're out in the ocean to help us find it. So we get the first tag back and it's this joy, but it's getting kind of late and we did some quick little glimpse on it. We made this agreement, okay, we're not going to look at it until everybody's able to sit down and watch it together. But I woke up in the middle of the night and I just shameful, I snuck up and I turned on the computer and I just dying to see, I couldn't sleep. I really want to know like, what we're going to see on here. And initially on there, it was just like so boring because I'm used to snorkeling places and it created this idea that, oh, it must be such a rich, colorful environment. Like, have you ever gone snorkeling in Hawaii? You'd be in a little reef and you got corals and fish and turtles. And no, if you are a killer whale, what you see is it looks green. It's just like green. Literally, it's like we're doing a Zoom call and you blur the background so you see no details of anything. You get a sense of light and whatnot. And the only time I could figure out where we were is when the killer whale broke the surface. The camera comes out of the water, go, oh, I can see a tree, I can see land. That must be where they are. But the whale's eyes doesn't break the surface. It's underwater the whole time. And so there are a few times when the whale comes in shallow, it's in some kelp. I go, oh, that's incredible. But that's not the daily life. And I was just left wondering, like, how do the whales know where they are? Like, they don't have a GPS map to go by, and they've got no visual cues to look at. So they're obviously using sound. They can hear everything. But short of when they come together and can see each other, it's a world devoid of much stimulation, whereas us as humans just look around at the colors, the depth. I mean, we are just inundated. It's like we're oversensed. We just feel everything. And for a whale, their world is so much simpler. But it gave me even more respect for them. But of course, then we got photobombed by the dolphins, and I go, whoa, now I'm seeing something that is just so neat. But we are getting snapshots, and we saw some of the most incredible things, particularly when the whales are up and traveling together, because now they stick together. It's literally when they're diving down the screen, but when they're together, then we got one piece of footage where we can see like a calf coming up and nursing on the fly, just like, hanging on as they're going. And that's pretty neat. Or we saw another time where we've got a mom swimming with her calf. So the filmmaker, the killer whale's in behind, but he's filming the ones in front. And we see like a mom and calf side by side, and the calf turns on its side, belly up, and mom then rubs it with her side fluke and rubs the belly. And then it's time to breathe. So they both turn over and they surface again. And I realized, gosh, there's so much going on underwater. And they're like touching each other as they swim and bumping into each other. And there's just so much physical contact. And we don't appreciate that when you just sit on a boat and watch. And I began to see so many parallels with people, what holds them together. It's really touch is so important. And I guess at Valentine's, we feel even more importance of touch. But I think in some cases for killers, you might say, well, every day is a Valentine's Day because there is just this constant physical touch among each other. And I think it's one of the things that holds them together, provides those bonds, those reassurances as well. And that was something too that just hit me as I watched this footage of these remarkable encounters.
Who knew their love language was physical touch? That's crazy.
Mind you, they're not kissing, but they are touching. How's that?
You're such a an amazing storyteller. Where did your passion for the marine world begin?
I grew up in Nova Scotia, and there's probably no better place in Canada than the Maritimes, whether you're talking about Newfoundland or Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island for storytelling. Like we just hear it without realizing we're hearing stories. And so that's probably something that I learned early on. And then my interest in the ocean came via my father, who was actually a UBC alumnus as well. He did his PhD at UBC, but in physics, and he became an oceanographer and he studied ocean currents. So as a kid, he would load me, my four brothers and sisters, and our mom, and we would go to like Newfoundland or Cape Breton Island, and he would like knock on the door of a farmer's house and say, "Can we put our tent up in the bluff over the ocean?" We spent our summers there. I remember showers was waiting for the rain to come. So my mom would push us all out of the tent with soap as it rained. And then we got to play on the beaches and go with him. And it was just like, so I guess that's where I first saw the ocean without realizing it was something you could study. It was just something my dad did for work. And I guess I didn't really know either that I was going to go down a track of marine mammals. I knew that as a kid, I loved animals. I've always had that attraction, whether they were from my aunt's farm or animals were kept at home. But also, I think the other thing I heard from my dad was mathematics. And I really went to university to study mathematics. But I ended up applying it to biology and doing mathematical modeling in biology. And I just found a really interesting problem. It turned out that a lot of people in biology don't like math, and that's why they're doing biology. Of course, a lot of that has changed today. But that got me into it. And then I just found these really interesting problems about northern fur seals, a species that breeds up in Alaska that was declining, issues with harbor seals and humpback whales and killer whales and stellar sea lions. And anyway, that's how I sort of got into it. But I didn't know from day one that's what I would do. It was like at each juncture of my life is okay, do I go right or left? And this is where I ended up.
I love that. Wow. Coast to coast. So we're going to kind of go back serious here. With the world on fire as a scientist, you, I imagine, have good and bad days with a healthy level of climate anxiety. What helps you stay grounded and hopeful despite knowing that our oceans are changing and getting warmer and all that stuff?
Pretty much all of us that work in marine mammals, I think we must be among the most optimistic people in the world. I can introduce you to my colleagues who work on fisheries. They're not so happy. In many cases with marine mammals, we're finding that the public cares about them. And so we have laws to protect them. For the most part, they're recovering around the world. We still have some populations in trouble. And so in many ways, they are also providing us insights and a way to understand how the ocean is changing, how they're going to adapt to it. It's much harder, though, when you're dealing with other situations. And, I'm not quite sure what to say in terms of the optimism, but, for me, I guess I see it's hard to get people to care about the oceans. It's just a flat body of water, and sometimes it's stormy and rough, and I get seasick, and like, what's there to love about it? And yet I think as we talk about the oceans through the eyes of a whale, for example, it engages people. And so if we're talking about, what warmer temperatures is doing, not to the whales per se, but to their food, people start to listen more. So I think they are ambassadors of the ocean, and I feel very pleased to get to work on a daily basis with those ambassadors.
And as we mentioned, this is our Valentine's Day episode, which is really fun. And just hearing how passionately you spoke about the way different mammals, marine mammals communicate underwater. I wonder if there's any communication advice you've gleaned from researching marine mammals just in your day-to-day life.
One thing I've learned over time is that not everything is the way you think it is. And sometimes we just have to look at things in different ways to realize we misunderstood something. It's worthwhile to have a second look. And the more time we spend thinking about things, the more we realize how much better we do understand it. But it takes time. And that's the one thing I think that keeps it going in the research is that we never know what new surprising thing we're going to discover. And just when we think we know it all, we find out that we're still just scratching the surface.
How romantic.
Thank you so much for chatting with us today, Andrew. It's been so nice to learn from you.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's been a pleasure chatting with both of you as well. Happy Valentine's.
As I get older, I learn more about romance and companionship. Jeevan, did you have any lessons learned about romantic love from the marine world?
Following some of Dr. Trites' wisdom, I thought a lot about challenging beauty standards, about the world of sea lions, and about how companionship might be found in places where we least expect it. I mean, would have thought that orcas and dolphins had the relationship that they had.
Are you going to ask me about my thoughts?
Yeah, I should probably do that. Another lesson to learn about communication. What have you learned about romantic love for the marine world, Carol?
Thank you so much, my foraging partner. I learned that I am like the dolphins. I don't want to do all the work, but I'll lead you so that you think that you're the leader, but really I'm the leader. I liked that about them. They're really sneaky guys. One might say that's my romantic style. I don't know. Do you have any final words of wisdom to our listeners as they prepare to love their loved ones? Maybe tips to our listeners, perhaps?
Just being open to new experiences, like Dr. Trite said, maybe looking at things from different perspectives. That's my little tidbit.
Well said, and I think that's a great place to wrap up. So, thanks everyone for listening. Make sure you catch our next episode by subscribing or following our show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, if you missed our Valentine's Day episode from last year, that's going to be in the show notes. You won't want to miss it. If you are feeling your feels, please drop us a review. You can find me on Blue Sky at Carol Eugene Park.
And me on Twitter at Jeevan K. Sangha. From Here Forward is an alumni UBC podcast produced by Kylie McFedrin for Podium Podcast Company.